Today we're making a simple dragon, and I already attempted this before, but it ended up a little too complicated with some not so clean cuts. So I wanted to simplify it a little bit to make it more beginner friendly. For this project you're gonna need a piece of wood about 4x4x9 centimeters. You can also use a slightly bigger or slightly smaller block as long as the proportions are the same. But a 1x1 inch block is probably too small for the level of detail we're about to make. The first thing we're gonna do is a sweeping cut. Something like this is enough. So I started from the halfway point between this end and this end and made a sweeping cut so that this face is now about the same size as these two. Then on these corners here, slightly above this point, we're gonna mark two little lines like that, and we're gonna make some more sweeping cuts, but we're gonna leave this much wood in the middle here. That's good. Next we're gonna draw a very simple profile for the neck. So we're gonna make a curve like this. The furthest away point over here is gonna be about at the same level as this edge. So halfway between these two edges. And then we're gonna draw another curve from this end point. So this curve goes from here to this edge, and from this end point of this curve all the way over here, we're gonna draw another curve, something like that. And now we're gonna remove this piece of wood. So I just made rough cuts and sweeping cuts until I got to this point, and now I'm gonna make V cuts. That's good enough for now. Next we can remove these edges. We want this to be round. This can remain straight, but everything else should be pretty round. That's good. Then we're gonna draw a line from this corner to this corner, like that. The same on the other side. Just a straight line. And we're going to remove that line with sweeping cuts. That's good enough for now. Next we're gonna make a curve over here. Something like this. That's gonna be the front of the neck. And then we're gonna leave enough room for the head. I'm flattening the head from the top already so that we'll have a better idea of the required space. So before we cut this part, we can take off these edges on the sides of the neck and carve it so that there's just a single edge that runs along the neck and the head. Something like this. And now we can carve this part. We're gonna leave a little bit more room over here for the head. And this can be done with V cuts. Like that. Next we're gonna make the tail. So from the back here, from the middle we make 2 lines. One short one like this, and then a long one like this. So you can decide on which side you want the tail to be, and then when you have a curve like this, the middle of the tail starts from the middle here. We can make some V-cuts. And now that we've removed these lines with V-cuts, we're also gonna make stop cuts, because this tail is going to be the furthest away part of the dragon this way, and the wings are gonna be slightly more inward. So I'm making stop cuts to slim down the wings and to further define the tail as its own thing. That's good. And then we want to match this other wing to the thickness of this one. So even though there's not a tail in here, I'm going to take a few slices off. So that then the thickness is about the same. Here I'm just making a few more rough cuts to make the lower end of the wing a little bit curved like that. Next we're going to make a corner around here on the same height as the middle of the chest. Something like that. And the same on the other side. We're going to remove this bit of wood. Before we go any further, it's time to make things a little bit more proportionate, symmetrical, and smooth. So, for example, over here, I have way too much thickness this way on the neck compared to this way. So I need to slim this down. And then this is just a block. I can take away some of these sharp edges. I want there to be an edge over here instead of all over here. And then there are these corners everywhere basically that I can take away and make a little bit rounder. I'm still gonna leave plenty of wood on the head, so I'm only slimming the neck down with these stop cuts. The two most important cuts in this stage of making things smoother are this paring cut and this push cut. And by keeping the blade almost in the same direction as the wood, you're going to be able to take off very thin slices and not accidentally cut off a huge chunk of the wood. Something like this is good enough for now. We don't need to go into any more detail, and it doesn't make sense to finish up these shapes any further because we might want to iterate them further on. So now we're going to define the legs, and for that we draw a line to separate the feet from the rest of the legs, and then we make V-cuts. Be careful with this one, I just accidentally chipped a little bit of this off. Now I have to start this step from the beginning, and you don't want to push the feet too far back because then it's gonna get a lot trickier. I'm making this V-cut with a little bit of twist, so basically two very gently turning sweeping cuts in order to not cut these parts where the wings are. That's good enough. And then I'm gonna remove some of this wood. I'm making V-cuts also on the sides here, between the wings and the body. I'm also making sweeping cuts over here, so that then the angle between the legs and the feet isn't going to be too steep. Next we're going to carve the separation between the legs. And for that we're going to make this Y shape, maybe slightly lower. And then we're going to carve away the shape we just created. So here I'm making a V cut with the tip of the blade, like that. Next we're going to carve the feet, and that's just going to be 3 lines like this that we can carve with V cuts. Here I'm also making a very tight sweeping cut, because on the top here it just feels more natural. Okay, that's the basic shape. And now we're gonna have to do some cleanup in this area. So what that means is we're gonna take away some of the sharp edges, and then we're also gonna fix some proportional issues. So for example, over here the chest is too much outward. I wanna bring it in a little bit. And if you notice something similar on your dragon, now is a good time to fix that. Next we're gonna separate the wings from each other, and for that we draw a line on the back like this, and we want the line to split into 2 lines down here like that on both sides of the tail. And then we can make some sweeping cuts. And then on the bottom here, I think V cuts work a little bit better due to the grain of the wood. That's good for now. We can also smoothen these corners a little bit so that this crease transitions over here in a nice and smooth manner. We're gonna carve the wings a little further, and before that I'm gonna remove some of this bulkiness from the top parts. I'm gonna try to make these a little bit flatter. That's good. And then the same on the other side. Like that. Then I'm gonna create 2 more flat surfaces. So I'm gonna draw a line, and I'm gonna split this remaining area into 2 sections, like that. It's gonna give the wings a little bit of more like a dragon wing kind of shape. And then I'm gonna do the same on the other side. At this point I wanna make sure that this is pretty symmetrical. Looks about right. And then I'm not gonna make these exactly flat, I'm gonna make them slightly curved. So I'm making sweeping cuts between the lines like this, to create that shape of the bones in the wings and then the skin in between. If there's a lot of chipping, like rough chipping like this, and the sweeping cuts don't end up smooth, that means that this part of the wing is too much outward, And if it was leaning a little bit more in, like it is on this side, the cuts are much cleaner. If you have this problem, then you just need to take the wing a little bit further in, and then you're gonna be able to make a bit more clean sweeping cuts. So I'm just making these all the way through, even though it goes over the line where I want to keep it. But this is a very easy way to make clean sweeping cuts, and I can always move this line back up by removing some wood from here. Just don't make these too thin, because we still have to make the sweeping cuts over here too. Something like this. I think I'm gonna make one more line somewhere over here. I'm also trying to carve these two lines to be a little bit closer together. Like that. And then I'm just making a few sweeping cuts over here. To reveal another bone like that. That's good. Now on the top here, I'm making the edge of the wing a little bit rounder. Doesn't have to be this pointy. Then we're gonna make a couple curves to give the wings a little more shape. Something like this. So just between these ridges, these bones, we're gonna sketch curves like this. And then to carve them just requires a few sweeping cuts. This one over here is a little bit different, since we need to cut also from this side to be able to make that sweeping cut. But you can think of it kind of like a V cut, where just one side is curved like that. Okay, now we have all the basic features except for the head. And the head we're gonna define a little better with these sweeping cuts. In the front over here, I'm trying to make a symmetrical shape on both sides. And I'm paying attention especially to this triangular shape on the top that's forming. So I want to make this top part of the face symmetrical. It's pretty good. Then I'm gonna try to make this top part of the head also symmetrical with sweeping cuts. I'm gonna take away that angle and make it a little bit smoother. Something like that. So now we have this ridge that goes on the top of the head, and then we have a pretty decent symmetrical basic shape of the face. And then the rest of the head is just gonna be two surfaces on both sides, one over here and a curved surface over here, which we pretty much already have after the sweeping cuts like this. I'm still gonna make this surface a little bit better, and then I want to make the other side match. So we're basically creating this edge over here that goes from the brow ridge to the end of the jaw where the neck begins. Now we have a good basic shape. Now over here, by widening this flat area over here, we can make the dragon look a little more aggressive. Very small sweeping cuts like this in an angle, like a V-shape angle like this. It's gonna make it look more fierce. And then we can make the snout look a little bit more like a beak by creating this sharper edge on the front and giving it also a little bit of curvature like this, like that. And then a few sweeping cuts on these side edges can be used to slim down the face a little bit. Next we're going to carve the eyes, and I suggest sketching at least some lines like this before starting, and then we're just making very small V cuts like that, and then the same on the other side. Like that. We can make some nostrils the same way, just smaller V cuts like that on each side of the snout or the beak. Then starting from this edge, we're gonna make some more V cuts to carve the ears. Right around this corner between the neck and this edge of the jaw, I'm making a few V cuts like this, and then on the other side of this edge like that, and we have an ear. And now we can take off some of the wood from around the ears so that the ears are not just a couple of V cuts, but that they actually come out of the head. Now that we carved these details, the neck around here is quite thin and it looks a bit wonky. So I need to slim this down to make it match better. I'm gonna slim down the head a little bit more by making some V cuts. Apart from making some adjustments on the proportions and the cuts we've already made, there's one more thing left to do. And that's an easy step, but it makes a big difference. We're gonna make some V cuts on the ridge on the back of the head and the neck over here. We're gonna create these scales. You gotta be careful with these because this thin ridge can split very easily, so don't apply a lot of pressure, just slide the blade, be patient, and this is a nice little detail that adds a little bit of texture and some of those dragon-like features to the figure. I'm also making V-cuts on the sides of the V-cuts that I just created, so here's a cut. I'm also gonna make another cut over here to make this tip more pointy. So then same over here, it's a little bit more tricky, but I'm basically just removing these rectangular edges of the scales, like that. Now we can also carve some toes with V-cuts, and then on the top here, I think sweeping cuts work better. Very, very small and tight sweeping cuts. I'm making the same kind of scaly texture also on the tail. And then with a few sweeping cuts, I'm trying to create this inner edge for this wing. A couple more V-cuts to create that clear distinction with an inside corner.